G'day everybody, my name is Lowell and welcome to the channel. So we have a reaction video. Now, the last time I did this, gentlemen, it was a video called What Have the Brits Ever Done For Us? Now, that got some conversations going in the chat for sure. This one we're going to do is what have the Americans ever done for us? So let's jump in and let's have, if I remember, he is an Australian. So let's jump in. Let's see what he's got to say for himself.
Ever done for us, but what about the Americans? What have they done for us scientifically? And on this 250th anniversary of America, I think we need to remind ourselves.
Okay.
Nowadays, it's become very fashionable to criticize America. Too many people just don't like.
Was that flag upside down in the state of distress? Yep. Okay.
It's become very fashionable to criticize America. Too many people just don't like the fact that the US is the most powerful country on earth today, and in fact the most powerful country ever. But we need to look at the achievements, especially the scientific achievements of the US, and how they've been put to good use to really appreciate what the Americans have done for us. Now, this video is similar to other videos I've done on the incredible achievements of the British and Jewish scientists, two other groups who are generally greatly underappreciated nowadays. Now, it's going to be a bit different to those because people don't actually know much about the incredible achievements of the Brits or the Jews and various others, but they do understand that the US is at the forefront of science. So this is more about getting people to appreciate what they already know. Now, talking of the Brits, I think it's fair to say that the British are actually ahead of the Americans, or were ahead, in basic scientific discovery. Things like discovering all the building blocks of matter, electrons, protons, neutrons, atoms, and then things like Newton's laws of motion, which describes the motion of anything bigger than an atom, and incredible medical discoveries such as antiseptics, antibiotics, and vaccines. Fundamental science. The Brits were ahead, but they cheated. Those dastardly British, because they were actually there much earlier than the Americans. So while the British were inventing steam engines and the laws of electromagnetism, the Americans were expanding the Western frontier and building a country. I think it's fair to say that the Americans did not become technologically dominant, certainly not before the 1930s, but really hit their form in the Second World War and immediately after. And the contribution of the Americans has been more in the sense of technological and engineering progress than basic discovery. They've applied those basic laws of physics, chemistry, and biology like no other country. Let's start with quite an important example. Electricity and everything associated with it. The AC power systems that we use in power stations throughout your house was pioneered by the likes of George Westinghouse, who also invented dozens of other things, including train air brakes, which is not a bad invention, I think.
Well,
his great rival...
Is he the one that also makes the white goods? That's Westinghouse, isn't it? Yeah.
Including train air brakes, which is not a bad invention, I think. His great rival, Thomas Alva Edison, invented, of course, light bulbs, and was partially responsible for electrocuting elephants to prove that George Westinghouse's AC system was dangerous. Terrible. That's an interesting story.
That's horrific. But in the old days, experiments, that's what they used to do, you know, to get their point across. But, I mean, Edison, there's a lot of controversy around Edison if you read into it and whatever else. But for the sake of this video, we'll skip over that part.
Westinghouse's AC system was dangerous. That's an interesting story. That a great American competition spirit pushing things ahead. Then we have the Serbian who did his great work in America, none other than Nikola Tesla, who invented AC motors, which are quite important, and developed radio communications. And while we're on the subject of Tesla, how about Elon Musk of South African origin, who's responsible for the world's first genuinely viable electric car. Then the Scottish-American Alexander Graham Bell, who invented the phone. You might be getting the drift here. You might be a smart person, but you go to America to make things happen. Then there is Joseph Henry, who invented the electric relay. It's a
Oh,
mechanism
yeah, okay.
for using a small current to switch or turn on a bigger current. It's utterly essential for electrical systems in power stations and even in your car, even today. And to prove that Americans aren't just about doing applied stuff, we have the incredible Robert Millikan, who did a remarkable experiment to try to find the charge on an electron, the fundamental unit of charge. So if you ever use electricity or any of those things, then you better thank the Americans. The next one's an...
Well, I guess it would all go back to Franklin, wouldn't it? Benjamin Franklin, obviously American, with the key and the kite and everything else. And, you know, I guess that's kind of going back that far.
Thank the Americans. The next one's an example of why we should be especially thankful to the Americans and their top tech prominence. And that's the development of nuclear technology, and I mean the atom bomb. And I know what you're thinking. Well, it wasn't exactly a good thing, was it, to develop the atom bomb? Is it something really to be proud of? Well, yes, it actually is, especially when you consider the alternative, that some other horrible dictator like Hitler invents it first.
Wow.
The American Manhattan Project rested on the basic research, mostly done in Britain, in fact, but turbocharged by Jewish scientists who were thrown out by Hitler. The Manhattan Project epitomized everything good about America, incredible industrial capacity. The expertise came from everywhere, where by anyone, the can-do attitude made not just one type of bomb, but two different type of bombs, Nagasaki and Hiroshima. And they did it in just a few years, where other countries like the Germans didn't even get close. And what did they then do? Yes, they used it to finish the war in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and they saved millions of Americans and Japanese lives by avoiding a horrible attritional war. Now, I don't want to go into the argument whether that was right or wrong, because I want to dwell on what happened in the years after Hiroshima. America was in a position at that stage like no other country had ever been in history. They could obliterate any other country because they alone had the bomb. It wasn't Hitler. Can you imagine if Stalin had had it? Can you imagine if somebody like Genghis Khan had had the bomb? And what did America do? Despite having the biggest trump card in the history of the world, it did not threaten anybody with obliteration. It helped to rebuild Japan and Germany and Europe. So God bless America for that. The rest of the world was incredibly lucky for the Americans' tech dominance and the people and the American politics.
I guess when you look at it that way, like you said, you know, they did have that, you know, as you put it, trump card, where they could have pulled it out and said, look, you know what? Everybody bow down to us because now we've got this bomb. You know, they could have very easily done that. Might have been a few countries at that time that would have done that. But like you said, you know, America just said, oh, well, we've got it. Now we're going to help everybody rebuild. Okay.
The next one's obvious, but we need to mention it just so we appreciate it, and that's the computer revolution. Now, of course, everybody's heard about, you know, of course they invented the internet, developed search engines, AI, all the recent stuff, but I want to concentrate on something less known, but utterly fundamental at the bottom of a computer, and that is the invention of the transistor. 3 layers of silicon, the invention of the transistor by John Bardeen, Walter Brattain, and William Shockley in 1947. It's an electronically controlled switch, and it's the primary building block of every computer.
Dang.
A modern CPU in a computer now has billions, maybe tens or even hundreds of billions of transistors. And it turns out it was actually the British who were the first to invent the electronic computer in World War II, but they had to use huge electronic valves as the switches. You can literally put hundreds of billions of transistors just for one of the old valves. If the only thing the Americans ever did for the world was to invent the transistor, it's far more than almost any country has ever done. And now let's talk biotechnology. and we're only
Okay.
going to scan over perhaps the most important ones, though you could argue with this. Of course, the American scientists and companies have really shaped the biotechnology industry. We have things like the invention of recombinant DNA, which is essentially a method to cut pieces of DNA using bacteria as factories. Then we have the so-called PCR reaction, the polymerase chain reaction, where you can actually make millions of exact copies of a particular part of DNA in just a few hours. Think of it as a molecular copying machine. It revolutionized forensics, ancestry tracing, and of course medical testing for diseases, including COVID, as it turns out. Then you have the CRISPR gene editing system. So this is essentially a system of molecular scissors, so you can cut and change sequences of DNA extremely precisely. And this is now being used in research cures for genetic disorders and to improve crop resilience. And we must remember the remarkable invention of genetically modified crops. Yes, I know that a lot of people don't like this, but it's been a revolution in terms of food production. Genetically modified crops is feeding billions of people around the world.
I mean, when you think about everything that we eat, like even tomatoes have been modified some way, you know, just through breeding and everything else like that. You know, mainly all the fruit and vegetables, if you've seen what they used to look like and what they look like now, completely different. You know, and that's all down to, you know, modifying the strains and all that kind of stuff, interbreeding and all that kind of stuff. It's been going on for a long, long time, but okay.
And of course, we have the
Aviation,
minor invention of the airplane by the Wright brothers.
It's amazing they went from 60 years, they went from basically inventing it, you know, having it being able to work, to landing on the moon. That's a crazy jump. You know, we went from horse and cart for however many thousands of years, and then within a generation or two, we get rid of the horses. You know, that whole industry's gone, and then we're flying and everything else. It's just crazy to think about.
Have the minor invention of the airplane by the Wright brothers. But actually, the US have been at the forefront of aeronautical development right from the beginning. And it's not just the theoretical and, you know, technical development, it's the ability to build them cheaply and strong. Planes like the DC-3, the Boeing 707, the Boeing 747, and the safety systems that are inside those aircraft. Next time you fly, thank the Americans, even if you're flying on an Airbus, because much of those aircraft and the technology behind them is US developed.
Dang. Okay.
Now, the next one is something that is not appreciated, especially nowadays, and that's the ability to extract oil and gas, actually, out of the ground. Because after all, where would we be without oil? And the ability to produce vast quantities of plant food, carbon dioxide, and as a side product, power our cars and our aeroplanes and things like that. And the Americans were always at the forefront of oil extraction. It's actually an incredible technological feat to be able to suck black sludge or gas from 1,000 feet below the surface. The Americans were there right at the beginning. Edwin Drake, who was the first to have a commercial oil rig in Pennsylvania.
Oh, wow, okay.
But then there's the marine offshore oil rigs. So you have the likes of Alden Dock Laborde, who revolutionized deep sea drilling by creating mobile oil rigs. And then much more recently, we have fracking. The crazy people hate fracking for gas. They really should have used a different name. I think people would have liked it much more. It's essentially underground, there are vast quantities of hydrocarbon gas and oil, which are locked up in very, very hard rock and very, very difficult to get out. The easy stuff is actually just a small percentage of all the gas that's in the ground. And you have to microscopically just put little cracks into that rock and the gas flows. And this development of fracking has allowed the US to become a dominant hydrocarbon source, which has already unlocked huge reserves of this wonderful material. It was George Wilson.
I mean, I don't know. I don't know a lot about fracking at all. But you always hear those horror stories. Oh yeah, they came and they were doing the fracking, and now there's massive sinkholes all over the country. It's like, I don't know how true that is. I don't know, but it sounds pretty straightforward. You know, tiny little cracks. I don't know how tiny the little cracks are. Maybe not that small. But as I said, you know, the black stuff that we get is such a small percentage. There's so much more down there. Will we ever get it? I don't know. Don't know.
Has already unlocked huge reserves of this wonderful material. It was George Wilson's team who successfully pioneered the injection of water, sand, and some very benign chemicals combined with being able to drill horizontally, and they made it cheap and easy to pull vast amounts of energy out of the ground. Aren't the Americans wonderful? And on the subject of oil, we need to conclude with what many would regard as the greatest invention in history. I'm sure you can guess what it is.
Okay.
The American small block V8. God, I love that noise.
Yep.
Okay, well, I've run out of time, and I'm sure many of you are thinking, but you didn't mention such and such. So I guess I'm sorry, but actually I'm not, because in fact the whole point is that it's not possible to do a short video or even a long video on all the groundbreaking tech and discoveries that came out of the US. The problem is that the Americans have just done too much. So you see, it's their fault again. It's always their fault, it seems nowadays.
Blame the Americans.
So for those of you who don't like America, maybe you need to have a bit of a reappraisal. Next time you turn on a light, use electricity, or do any of those sorts of things where the Americans are behind it. We're in fact incredibly lucky to have as our superpower, which is at worst relatively benign and which has bailed out the world, and especially countries like Australia and the United Kingdom, say in the Second World War, and which has protected us in the 80 years since, and has also contributed hugely to scientific and technological advancement. So happy 250th birthday, America. You are still appreciated.
Okay. That was interesting. Obviously a long list of things that America has invented. Like you said, it's too short of a video, and even a long one wouldn't be able to cover them all anyway. But I was thinking about some of those things, you know, obviously electricity, you know, where would we be without that? You know, if you've ever had a blackout for longer than 4 hours, you know how much you appreciate electricity, you know, and then obviously, you know, computers and stuff like that. Where would we be without computers or mobile phones, you know, which was again invented in America? It's just things you don't realize were invented there. You know, America gets a bad rap all the time in every media, you know, America this and America that and Americans this. And it's just like you said, I think, have a look at what they invented and maybe reassess your opinion of Americans, because without them, where would we be? I don't know. So, but very interesting video. Gives you a lot to think about. That is for sure. So let me know if you enjoyed that one, guys. Thank you very much for joining me today. Make sure you stay safe, and I'll definitely see you in the next reaction video. Oh, you're still here? You want more content? Why don't you check out my Patreon down here? You'll get plenty more content and some exclusive videos over there too. If not, why not check out this one over here?